Welcome to today's Triple Z. The Triple Z podcast is a daily program that you can use to help you fall asleep each night. Just turn down the volume, lay back, relax, and enjoy as you fall asleep. We saw that our podcast was topping the charts in Philippines, so we are going to read their Wikipedia entry. Let's learn about this interesting country in the dullest way possible. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to write us a review on your podcast platform and share us with a friend. You both might sleep just a little better at night. Our website is Triple Z, that's 3zs.media. You can also like and share our content on Facebook or our Instagram account ZZZ Media Podcast. Music for today's episode was provided by the Sleep Channel on Spotify. The Philippines is situated in the western Pacific Ocean and consists of around 7,641 islands that are broadly categorized under three main geographical divisions from north to south: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The Philippines is bounded by the South China Sea to the west, the Philippine Sea to the east, and the Celebes Sea to the southwest. It shares maritime borders with Taiwan to the north, Japan to the northeast, Palau to the east and southeast, Indonesia to the south, Malaysia to the southwest, Vietnam to the west, and China to the northwest. The Philippines covers an area of 300,000 square kilometers, 120,000 square miles, and, as of 2021, it had a population of around 109 million people, making it the world's 13th most populous country. The Philippines has diverse ethnicities and cultures throughout its islands. Manila is the country's capital, while the largest city is Quezon City. Both lie within the urban area of Metro Manila. Negritos, some of the archipelago's earliest inhabitants, were followed by successive waves of Austronesian peoples. Adoption of animism, Hinduism, and Islam established island kingdoms called Kadachuan, Rajanates, and Sultanates. The arrival of Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer leading a fleet for Spain, marked the beginning of Spanish colonization. In 1543, Spanish explorer Ruy López de Villalobos Code, promoted to Code ES, named the archipelago Las Islas Filipinas in honor of Philip II of Spain. Spanish settlement through Mexico, beginning in 1565, led to the Philippines becoming ruled by the Spanish Empire for more than 300 years. During this time, Catholicism became the dominant religion, and Manila became the western hub of trans-Pacific trade. In 1896, the Philippine Revolution began, which then became entwined with the 1898 Spanish-American War. Spain ceded the territory to the United States, while Filipino revolutionaries declared the First Philippine Republic. The ensuing Philippine-American War ended with the United States establishing control over the territory, which they maintained until the Japanese invasion of the islands during World War II. Following liberation, the Philippines became independent in 1946. Since then, the unitary sovereign state has often had a tumultuous experience with democracy, which included the overthrow of a decades-long dictatorship by a non-violent revolution. The Philippines is an emerging market and a newly industrialized country whose economy is transitioning from being agriculture-centered to services and manufacturing-centered. It is a founding member of the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, ASEAN, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, and the East Asia Summit. The location of the Philippines as an island country both on the Pacific Ring of Fire and close to the equator makes it prone to earthquakes and typhoons. The country has a variety of natural resources and is home to a globally significant level of biodiversity. Spanish explorer Ruy López de Villalobos, during his expedition in 1542, named the islands of Leyte and Samar Filipinas after Philip II of Spain, then the Prince of Asturias. Eventually, the name Las Islas Filipinas would be used to cover the archipelago's Spanish possessions. Before Spanish rule was established, other names such as Islas del Poniente, Western Islands, Islas del Oriente, Eastern Islands, and Ferdinand Magellan's name for the islands, San Lazaro, Islands of St. Lazarus, were also used by the Spanish to refer to islands in the region. During the Philippine Revolution, the Malolos Congress proclaimed the establishment of the Republica Filipina, or the Philippine Republic. From the period of the Spanish-American War, 1898, and the Philippine-American War, 1899 to 1902, until the Commonwealth period, 1935 to 1946, American colonial authorities referred to the country as the Philippine Islands, a translation of the Spanish name. The United States began the process of changing the reference to the country from the Philippine Islands to the Philippines, specifically when it was mentioned in the Philippine Autonomy Act or the Jones Law. The full official title, Republic of the Philippines, was included in the 1935 Constitution as the name of the future independent state. It is also mentioned in all succeeding constitutional revisions. There is evidence of early hominins living in what is now the Philippines as early as 709,000 years ago. A small number of bones from Callao Cave potentially represent an otherwise unknown species, Homo luzonensis, that lived around 50,000 to 67,000 years ago. The oldest modern human remains found on the islands are from the Taban Caves of Palawan, U/TH dated to 47,000 plus or minus 11 to 10,000 years ago. The Taban man is presumably a Negrito, who were among the archipelago's earliest inhabitants, descendants of the first human migrations out of Africa via the coastal route along southern Asia to the now sunken landmasses of Sundaland and Sahol. The first Austronesians reached the Philippines from Taiwan in around 2200 BC, settling the Baton's Islands and northern Luzon. From there, they rapidly spread southwards to the rest of the islands of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. This population assimilated with the existing Negritos. This resulted in the modern Filipino ethnic groups, which display various ratios of genetic admixture between Austronesian and Negrito groups. Jade artifacts have been found dated to 2000 BC, with the Linglino jade items crafted in Luzon made using raw materials originating from Taiwan. By 1000 BC, the inhabitants of the archipelago had developed into four kinds of social groups: hunter-gatherer tribes, warrior societies, island plutocracies, and port principalities. The earliest known surviving written record found in the Philippines is the Laguna copperplate inscription. By the 14th century, several of the large coastal settlements had emerged as trading centers and became the focal point of societal changes. Some polities had exchanges with other states across Asia. Trade with China is believed to have begun during the Tang dynasty and grew more extensive during the Song dynasty. By the second millennium, some polities participated in the tributary system of China. Indian cultural traits, such as linguistic terms and religious practices, began to spread within the Philippines during the 14th century, likely via the Hindu Majapahit Empire. By the 15th century, Islam was established in the Sulu archipelago and spread from there. Polities founded in the Philippines from the 10th to the 16th centuries include Manila, Tonda, Namayan, Pangasinan, Cebu, Butuan, Maguindanao, Lanao, Sulu, and Maui. The early polities were typically made up of three-tier social structures: a nobility class, a class of freemen, and a class of dependent debtor bondsmen. Among the nobility were leaders called datas, responsible for ruling autonomous groups called barangays or dulahan. When these barangays banded together, either to form a larger settlement or a geographically looser alliance, the more esteemed among them would be recognized as a paramount datu, raja, or sultan which headed the community state. Warfare developed and escalated during the 14th to 16th centuries, and throughout these periods population density is thought to have been low, which was also caused by the frequency of typhoons and the Philippines' location on the Pacific Ring of Fire. In 1521, Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan arrived in the area, claimed the islands for Spain, and was then killed by Lapu-Lapu's men at the Battle of Mactan. Colonization began when Spanish explorer Miguel López de Legazpi arrived from Mexico in 1565. The Spanish forces brought by Legazpi's 5 ships were a mix of Spaniards and Novo-Hispanics, Mexicans, from New Spain, modern Mexico. Many Filipinos were brought back to New Spain as slaves and forced crew. In 1571, Spanish Manila became the capital of the Spanish East Indies, which encompassed Spanish territories in Asia and the Pacific. The Spanish successfully invaded the different local states by employing the principle of divide and conquer, bringing most of what is now the Philippines into a single unified administration. Disparate barangays were deliberately consolidated into towns where Catholic missionaries were more easily able to convert the inhabitants to Christianity. From 1565 to 1821, the Philippines was governed as a territory of the Mexico City-based Viceroyalty of New Spain and later administered from Madrid following the Mexican War of Independence. Manila was the western hub of the Trans-Pacific trade. Manila galleons were constructed in Baikal and Cavite. During its rule, Spain quelled various indigenous revolts, as well as defending against external military challenges. War against the Dutch from the west in the 17th century, together with conflict with the Muslims in the south, nearly bankrupted the colonial treasury. Administration of the Philippine Islands was considered a drain on the economy of New Spain, and there were debates to abandon it or trade it for other territory. However, this was opposed because of economic potential, security, and the desire to continue religious conversion in the islands and the surrounding region. The colony survived on an annual subsidy provided by the Spanish crown, which averaged 250,000 pesos and was usually paid through the provision of 75 tons of silver bullion being sent from the Americas. British forces briefly occupied Manila from 1762 to 1764 during the 7 Years' War, with Spanish rule restored through the 1763 Treaty of Paris. The Spanish considered their war with the Muslims in Southeast Asia an extension of the Reconquista. The Spanish-Moro conflict lasted for several hundred years. In the last quarter of the 19th century, Spain conquered portions of Mindanao and Jolo, and the Moro Muslims in the Sultanate of Sulu formally recognized Spanish sovereignty. In the 19th century, Philippine ports opened to world trade, and shifts started occurring within Filipino society. Shifts in social identity occurred, with the term Filipino changing from referring to Spaniards born in the Philippines to a term encompassing all people in the archipelago. Revolutionary sentiments were stoked in 1872 after 3 activist Catholic priests were executed on weak pretenses. This would inspire a propaganda movement in Spain, organized by Marcelo H. Del Pilar, Jose Rizal, Graciano Lopez Gina, and Mariano Ponce, lobbying for political reforms in the Philippines. Rizal was executed on December 30, 1896, on charges of rebellion. This radicalized many who had previously been loyal to Spain. As attempts at reform met with resistance, Andres Bonifacio in 1892 established the militant secret society called the Katipunan, who sought independence from Spain through armed revolt. The Katipunan started the Philippine Revolution in 1896. Internal disputes led to an election in which Bonifacio lost his position and Emilio Aguinaldo was elected as the new leader of the revolution. In 1897, the Pact of Biak-na-Bato brought about the exile of the revolutionary leadership to Hong Kong. In 1898, the Spanish-American War began and reached the Philippines. Aguinaldo returned, resumed the revolution, and declared independence from Spain on June 12, 1898. The First Philippine Republic was established on January 21, 1899. The islands had been ceded by Spain to the United States along with Puerto Rico and Guam as a result of the latter's victory in the Spanish-American War in 1898. As it became increasingly clear the United States would not recognize the First Philippine Republic, the Philippine-American War broke out. The war resulted in the deaths of 250,000 to 1 million civilians, mostly because of famine and disease. Many Filipinos were also moved by the Americans to concentration camps, where thousands died. After the defeat of the First Philippine Republic in 1902, an American civilian government was established through the Philippine Organic Act. American forces continued to secure and extend their control over the islands, suppressing an attempted extension of the Philippine Republic, securing the Sultanate of Sulu, and establishing control over interior mountainous areas that had resisted Spanish conquest. Cultural development strengthened the continuing development of a national identity, and Tagalog began to take precedence over other local languages. Governmental functions were gradually devolved to Filipinos under the Taft Commission, and in 1935 the Philippines was granted Commonwealth status with Manuel Quezon as president and Sergio Osmeña as vice president. Quezon's priorities were defense, social justice, inequality and economic diversification, and national character. Tagalog was designated the national language, women's suffrage was introduced, and land reform mooted. During World War II, the Japanese Empire invaded, and the Second Philippine Republic, under Jose P. Laurel, was established as a puppet state. From 1942, the Japanese occupation of the Philippines was opposed by large-scale underground guerrilla activity. Atrocities and war crimes were committed during the war, including the Bataan Death March and the Manila Massacre. Allied troops defeated the Japanese in 1945. It is estimated that over 1 million Filipinos had died by the end of the war. On October 11, 1945, the Philippines became one of the founding members of the United Nations. On July 4, 1946, the Philippines was officially recognized by the United States as an independent nation through the Treaty of Manila during the presidency of Manuel Roxas. Efforts on post-war reconstruction and on ending the Balaap Rebellion continued during Roxas and his successor, Elpidio Quirino's, terms. However, it was only during Ramon Magsaysay's presidency that the movement was suppressed. Magsaysay's successor, Carlos P. Garcia, initiated the Filipino First policy, which was continued by Diosdado Macapagal, with celebration of Independence Day moved from July 4 to June 12, the date of Emilio Aguinaldo's declaration, and pursuit of a claim on the eastern part of North Borneo. In 1965, Macapagal lost the presidential election to Ferdinand Marcos. Early in his presidency, Marcos initiated numerous infrastructure projects but, together with his wife Imelda, was accused of corruption and embezzling billions of dollars in public funds. Nearing the end of his last constitutionally allowed term, Marcos declared martial law on September 21, 1972. This period of his rule was characterized by political repression, censorship, and human rights violations. Numerous monopolies controlled by crony businessmen were established in key industries, including logging, coconuts, grains, bananas, telephones, and broadcasting. A sugar monopoly led to a famine on the island of Negros. Marcos's heavy borrowing early in his presidency resulted in numerous economic crashes, exacerbated by a massive recession in the early 1980s, which culminated in the economy contracting by 7.3% in both 1984 and 1985. On August 21, 1983, Marcos's chief rival, opposition leader Benigno Aquino Jr., was assassinated on the tarmac at Manila International Airport. Marcos called a snap presidential election in 1986. Marcos was proclaimed the winner, but the results were widely regarded as fraudulent. The resulting protests led to the People Power Revolution, which forced Marcos and his allies to flee to Hawaii, and Aquino's widow, Corazon Aquino, was installed as president. The return of democracy and government reforms beginning in 1986 were hampered by national debt, government corruption, and coup attempts. A communist insurgency and a military conflict with Moro separatists persisted, while the administration also faced a series of disasters, including the sinking of the MV Dona Paz in December 1987 and the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in June 1991. Aquino was succeeded by Fidel V. Ramos, whose economic performance, at 3.6% growth rate, was overshadowed by the onset of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Ramos' successor, Joseph Estrada, who prioritized public housing for the masses, was overthrown by the 2001 EDSA revolution and succeeded by his vice president, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, on January 20, 2001. Arroyo's 9-year administration was marked by economic growth but was tainted by corruption and political scandals. On November 23, 2009, 34 journalists and several civilians were killed in Maguindanao. Economic growth continued during Benigno Aquino III's administration, which pushed for good governance and transparency. In 2015, a shootout in Mamasipano resulted in the death of 44 members of the Philippine National Police Special Action Force, which caused a delay in the passage of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Former Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte won the 2016 presidential election, becoming the first president from Mindanao. Duterte launched an infrastructure program and an anti-drug campaign, which reduced drug proliferation but has also led to extrajudicial killings. The implementation in 2018 of the Bangsamoro Organic Law led to the creation of the autonomous Bangsamoro region in Mindanao. In early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic reached the country, causing the gross domestic product to shrink by 9.5%, the country's worst annual economic performance since records began in 1947. Marcos's son, Bongbong Marcos, won the 2022 presidential election, together with Duterte's daughter, Sara Duterte, as vice president. The Philippines is an archipelago composed of about 7,640 islands, covering a total area, including inland bodies of water, of around 300,000 square kilometers, 115,831 square miles, with cadastral survey data suggesting it may be larger. It is located between 116 degrees 40 minutes and 126 degrees 34 minutes east longitude and 4 degrees 40 minutes and 21 degrees 10 minutes north latitude, and is bordered by the Philippine Sea to the east, the South China Sea to the west, the Celebes Sea to the south, and the Sulu Sea to the southwest. The country's 11 largest islands are Luzon, Mindanao, Samar, Negros, Palawan, Panay, Mindoro, Leyte, Cebu, Bohol, and Masbate. Together, they constitute about 95% of the country's total land area. The Philippines coastline measures 36,289 kilometers, 22,549 miles, the world's fifth longest. The country's exclusive economic zone covers 2,263,816 square kilometers, 874,064 square miles. The highest mountain is Mount Apo, measuring up to 2,954 meters, 9,692 feet above sea level and located on the island of Mindanao. Running east of the archipelago, the Philippine Trench extends 10,540 meters, 34,580 feet, down at the Emden Deep. The longest river is the Cagayan River in northern Luzon, measuring about 520 kilometers, 320 miles. Manila Bay, upon the shore of which the capital city of Manila lies, is connected to Laguna de Bay, the largest lake in the Philippines, by the Pasig River. Situated on the western fringes of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Philippines experiences frequent seismic and volcanic activity. The Philippine region is seismically active and has been progressively constructed by plates converging towards each other in multiple directions. Around 5 earthquakes are registered daily, though most are too weak to be sensed. The last major earthquakes were the 1976 Moro Gulf earthquake and the 1990 Luzon earthquake. The Philippines has 23 active volcanoes. Of these, Mayon, Taal, Canlaon, and Bulusan have the most number of recorded eruptions. The Philippines has valuable mineral deposits as a result of its complex geologic structure and high level of seismic activity. The country is thought to have the second largest gold deposits after South Africa, along with a large amount of copper deposits and the world's largest deposits of palladium. Other minerals include chromite, nickel, and zinc. Despite this, a lack of law enforcement, poor management, opposition because of the presence of indigenous communities, and past instances of environmental damage and disaster have resulted in these mineral resources remaining largely untapped. The Philippines is a megadiverse country, having among the highest rates of discovery and endemism in the world. The country has about 13,500 plant species, 3,200 of which are unique to the islands, 8,000 species of angiosperms and 1,100 species of ferns have been identified in the country. Philippine rainforests have an array of flora. These include many rare types of orchids and Rafflesia. Around 1,100 land vertebrate species can be found in the Philippines, including over 100 mammal species not thought to exist elsewhere. Additionally, the country has more than 20,000 species of insects, 99 species of amphibians, and 235 species of reptiles, 160 of which are endemic. Large reptiles include the Philippine crocodile and saltwater crocodile. The largest crocodile in captivity, known locally as Lalong, was captured in the southern island of Mindanao and held the distinction until its death on February 10, 2013. The Philippines has the third highest number of endemic birds in the world with 243 endemics. The national bird, known as the Philippine eagle, has the longest body of any eagle and generally measures 86 to 102 centimeters, 2.82 to 3.35 feet in length. Other notable birds include the celestial monarch, flame-templed babbler, red-vented cockatoo, whiskered pitta, Sulu hornbill, rufous hornbill, Luzon bleeding heart, and the flame-breasted fruit dove. As an important part of the Coral Triangle ecoregion, Philippine maritime waters produce unique and diverse marine life and contain the highest diversity of shorefish species in the world. New records and species of marine life are continually being discovered. Philippine waters also sustain the cultivation of fish, crustaceans, oysters, and seaweeds. One species of oyster, Pinctada maxima, produces pearls that are naturally golden in color. 8 major types of forests are distributed throughout the Philippines: dipterocarp, beech forest, pine forest, Mojave forest, lower montane forest, upper montane or mossy forest, mangroves, and ultrabasic forest. As of 2021, the Philippines has 7 million hectares of forest cover, according to official estimates, though experts contend that the actual figure is likely much lower. Deforestation, often the result of illegal logging, is an acute problem in the Philippines. Forest cover has declined from 70% of the Philippines' total land area in 1900 to about 18.3% in 1999, although government reforestation efforts have reversed the deforestation trend and raised the national forest cover, albeit marginally, by 177,441 hectares, 438,470 acres, from 2010 to 2015. The Philippines has more than 200 protected areas, which, as of 2023, has been expanded to cover 7.79 million hectares. World Heritage Sites include the Tabata Reef in the Sulu Sea and the Puerto Princesa subterranean river, which runs 8.2 kilometers, 5.1 miles, underground through a karst landscape before reaching the ocean. The Philippines has a tropical maritime climate that is usually hot and humid. There are 3 seasons: a hot dry season from March to May, a rainy season from June to November, and a cool dry season from December to February. The southwest monsoon lasts from May to October and the northeast monsoon from November to April. The coolest month is January, the warmest is May. Temperatures at sea level across the Philippines tend to be in the same range regardless of latitude. Average annual temperature is around 26.6 degrees Celsius, 79.9 degrees Fahrenheit, but can reach as low as 18.3 degrees Celsius, 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit in Baguio at an elevation of 1,500 meters, 4,900 feet, above sea level. Annual rainfall measures as much as 5,000 millimeters, 200 in the mountainous East Coast section, but less than 1,000 millimeters, 39 in some of the sheltered valleys. Sitting astride the typhoon belt, the Philippines is visited by around 19 typhoons in a typical year, usually from July to October, and 8 or 9 of these make landfall. The wettest recorded typhoon to hit the Philippines dropped 2,210 millimeters, 87 in Baguio from July 14 to 18, 1911. The Philippines is highly exposed to climate change and is among the world's 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change risks. The Philippines has a democratic government in the form of a constitutional republic with a presidential system. The president functions as both head of state and head of government and is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president is elected by direct election for a single 6-year term. The president appoints and presides over the cabinet. The bicameral Congress is composed of the Senate, serving as the upper house, with members elected to a 6-year term, and the House of Representatives, serving as the lower house, with members elected to a 3-year term. Philippine politics tends to be dominated by those with well-known names, such as members of political dynasties or celebrities. Senators are elected at large while the representatives are elected from both legislative districts and through sectoral representation. The judicial power is vested in the Supreme Court, composed of a Chief Justice as its presiding officer and 14 Associate Justices, all of whom are appointed by the President from nominations submitted by the Judicial and Bar Council. There have been attempts to change the government to a federal, unicameral, or parliamentary government since the Ramos administration. There is a significant amount of corruption in the Philippines, which some historians attribute to the system of governance put in place during the Spanish colonial period. As a founding and active member of the United Nations, the Philippines has been elected to the Security Council. The country is an active participant in peacekeeping missions, particularly in East Timor. The Philippines is also a founding and active member of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and is a member of the East Asia Summit, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, the Group of 24, and the Non-Aligned Movement. The country is also seeking to obtain observer status in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work overseas. The Philippines has a long relationship with the United States, covering economics, security, and people-to-people relations. A mutual defense treaty between the two countries was signed in 1951 and supplemented with the 1999 Visiting Forces Agreement and the 2016 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. The Philippines supported American policies during the Cold War and participated in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. In 2003, the Philippines was designated a major non-NATO ally. Under President Duterte, ties with the United States have weakened with military purchases instead coming from China and Russia, while Duterte states that the Philippines will no longer participate in any U.S.-led wars. In 2021, it was revealed the United States would defend the Philippines, including the South China Sea. The Philippines attaches great importance to its relations with China and, under President Duterte, has established significant cooperation with the country. Japan is the biggest bilateral contributor of official development assistance to the country, although historical tensions exist because of the events of World War II, much of the animosity has faded. Historical and cultural ties continue to affect relations with Spain. Relations with Middle Eastern countries are shaped by the high number of Filipinos working in these countries and by issues related to the Muslim minority in the Philippines. Concerns have been raised regarding issues such as domestic abuse and war affecting the approximately 2.5 million overseas Filipino workers in the region. The Philippines has claims in the Spratly Islands which overlap with claims by China, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Vietnam. The largest of its controlled islands is Thitu Island, which contains the Philippines' smallest village. The Scarborough Shoal standoff in 2012, where China took control of the shoal from the Philippines, led to an international arbitration case which the Philippines eventually won, but China have rejected, and has made the shoal a prominent symbol in the wider dispute. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, consist of three branches: the Philippine Air Force, the Philippine Army, and the Philippine Navy. The AFP is a volunteer force. Civilian security is handled by the Philippine National Police under the Department of the Interior and local government. As of 2022, the AFP has a total manpower of around 280,000, in which 130,000 are active military personnel, 100,000 are reserves, and 50,000 are paramilitaries. In 2021, $4.090.5 billion, or 1.04% of GDP, was spent on military forces. Most of the Philippines' defense spending goes to the Philippine Army, which leads operations against internal threats such as the communist and Muslim separatist insurgencies. The country's preoccupation with internal security affairs contributed to the decline of Philippine naval capabilities beginning in the 1970s. A military modernization program was launched in 1995 and expanded in 2012 to build a more capable defense system. In Bangsamoro, the largest separatist organizations, the Moro National Liberation Front and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, signed final peace agreements with the government in 1996 and 2014, respectively. Other more militant groups like the Abu Sayyaf have kidnapped foreigners for ransom, particularly in the Sulu Archipelago. Their presence decreased through successful security provided by the Philippine government. The Communist Party of the Philippines and its military wing, the New People's Army, have been waging guerrilla warfare against the government since the 1970s, reaching its apex in 1986, when communist guerrillas gained control of a fifth of the country's territory before significantly dwindling militarily and politically after the return of democracy in 1986. The Philippines is divided into 17 regions, 82 provinces, 146 cities, 1,488 municipalities, and 42,036 barangays. Regions other than Bangsamoro serve primarily to organize the provinces of the country for administrative convenience. As of 2020, Calabarzon was the most populated region, while the National Capital Region, NCR, was the most densely populated. The Philippines is governed as a unitary state, with the exception of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, BRMM, although there have been several steps towards decentralization within the unitary framework. A 1991 law devolved some powers to local governments. The Philippines has a population of 109,035,343 as of May 1, 2020. In 2015, 51.2% of the Philippine population lived in urban areas. The capital city of Manila and the country's most populous city, Quezon City, lie within Metro Manila. Around 12.8 million or 13% of the national population live in Metro Manila, the country's most populated metropolitan area and the fifth most populous in the world. The Philippines has a median age of 22.7, in which 60.9% of the population is aged 15 to 64. Average annual population growth rate in the Philippines continues to decrease, although government attempts to further reduce population growth have been a contentious issue. Poverty incidence dropped to 18.1% in 2021 from 25.2% in 2012. There is substantial ethnic diversity with the Philippines, a product of the seas and mountain ranges dividing the archipelago, along with significant foreign influences. According to the 2010 census, 24.4% of Filipinos are Tagalog, 11.4% Visayan/Bisaya, excluding Cebuano, Hiligaynon, and Wari, 9.9% Cebuano, 8.8% Ilocano, 8.4% Hiligaynon, 6.8% Bicol, 4% Wari, and 26.2% are others, which can be broken down further to yield more distinct non-tribal groups like the Moro, Kapampangan, Pangasinense, Ibanag, and Ivatan. As of 2010, there were 110 ethno-linguistic groups numbered at around 14 to 17 million persons comprising the country's indigenous peoples. These include the Igorot, the Lumad, the Mangian, and the tribes of Palawan. Negritos are considered among the earliest inhabitants of the islands. These Maori Aboriginal settlers are an Australoid group and are left over from the first human migration out of Africa to Australia and were likely displaced by later waves of migration. At least some Negritos in the Philippines have Denisovan admixture in their genomes. Ethnic Filipinos generally belong to several Southeast Asian ethnic groups classified linguistically as part of the Austronesian or Malayo-Polynesian speaking people. There is some uncertainty over the origin of this Austronesian speaking population. It is likely that ancestors related to Taiwanese Aborigines brought their language and mixed with existing populations in the area. The Lumad and Samabucho ethnic groups have ancestral affinity with the Austroasiatic Mlabri and Tin peoples of mainland Southeast Asia. There was a westward expansion of Papuan ancestry from Papua New Guinea to eastern Indonesia and Mindanao detected among the Bland and Sangir. Under Spanish rule, there was some immigration from elsewhere in the empire, especially from the Spanish Americas. According to the Kaiser Permanente (KP) research program on genes, environment, and health (RPGEH), a substantial proportion of Filipinos sampled have modest amounts of European descent consistent with older admixture. In addition to this, the National Geographic Project concluded in 2016 that people living in the Philippine Archipelago carry genetic markers in the following percentages: 53% Southeast Asia and Oceania, 36% Eastern Asia, 5% Southern Europe, 3% Southern Asia, and 2% Native American from Latin America. Chinese Filipinos are mostly the descendants of immigrants from Fujian in China after 1898, numbering around 2 million, although there are an estimated 20% of Filipinos who have partial Chinese ancestry stemming from pre-colonial and colonial Chinese migrants. While a distinct minority, Chinese Filipinos are well integrated into Filipino society. As of 2023, there are almost 300,000 American citizens living in the country. There are also up to 250,000 Amerasians scattered across the cities of Angeles, Manila, and Olongapo. Other important non-indigenous minorities include Indians and Arabs. There are also Japanese people, which include escaped Christians, Kirishitan, who fled the persecutions of Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. The descendants of mixed-race couples are known as Tisoi. Ethnologue lists 186 individual languages in the Philippines, 182 of which are living languages, while 4 no longer have any known speakers. Most native languages are part of the Philippine branch of the Malayo-Polynesian languages, which is a branch of the Austronesian language family. In addition, various Spanish-based Creole varieties collectively called Chavacano exist. There are also many Philippine Negrito languages that have unique vocabularies that survived Austronesian acculturation. Filipino and English are the official languages of the country. Filipino is a standardized version of Tagalog, spoken mainly in Metro Manila. Both Filipino and English are used in government, education, print, broadcast media, and business, with third local languages often being used at the same time. The Philippine Constitution provides for the promotion of Spanish and Arabic on a voluntary and optional basis. Spanish, which was widely used as a lingua franca in the late 19th century, has since declined greatly in use, although Spanish loanwords are still present today in Philippine languages, while Arabic is mainly taught in Islamic schools in Mindanao. 19 regional languages act as auxiliary official languages used as media of instruction. Other indigenous languages such as Kinan, Ifugao, Ibayat, Kalinga, Kameo, Kankanay, Masbatino, Romblomanon, Manobo, and several Visayan languages are prevalent in their respective provinces. The Filipino Sign Language is the national sign language of the Philippines and the language of instruction of deaf education. Although the Philippines is a secular state which protects freedom of religion, an overwhelming majority of Filipinos consider religion very important and irreligion is extremely low. Christianity is the dominant faith, shared by about 89% of the population. As of 2013, the country had the world's third largest Roman Catholic population and was the largest Christian nation in Asia. Census data from 2015 found that about 79.53% of the population profess Catholicism. An independent Catholic church, the Philippine Independent Church, has around 756,225 adherents. Protestants make up about 6% of the population. 2.64% of the population are members of Iglesia Ni Cristo, while the combined following of the Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches comes to 2.42% of the total population. The Philippines is a major center of Christian missionaries around the world and has become a training center for foreign priests and nuns. Islam is the second largest religion. The Muslim population of the Philippines was reported as 6.01% of the total population according to census returns in 2015. Conversely, a 2012 report by the National Commission of Muslim Filipinos stated that about 10,700,000 or 11% of Filipinos are Muslims. The majority of Muslims live in Mindanao and nearby islands. Most practice Sunni Islam under the Shafi'i school. Around 0.24% of the population practice indigenous Philippine folk religions whose practices and folk beliefs are often syncretized with Christianity and Islam. Buddhism is practiced by around 0.03% of the population, concentrated among Filipinos of Chinese descent.